Lynn, why don't you introduce Brenda?
Yes. Okay. There you are, Brenda. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce Brenda DeGrazio Allington, who I'll start with her bio here. She received her BSN from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, her midwifery from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. She is a retired certified nurse midwife and the first nurse midwife to practice in Missoula, providing women's health and OB care at both hospitals. She is a veteran of the United States Air Force. Her husband is a professor at the School of Pharmacy. She has 2 adult sons and 2 pit bull granddogs. Her title of her presentation today is Lions and Tigers and Bears, Oh My, a firsthand experience in the borderlands. And I invited her because I heard a little bit of her story at a social gathering and thought it'd be great for her to tell more about it. Thank you, Brenda, for being here today.
Thank you, Lynn, for inviting me.
Pretty sure she's trying to share her screen.
There you go.
Yeah, you got it.
Do
Okay, hold
the
on.
screen show.
I need to get back up to one here. No. Almost there. Okay, first of all, I'd just like to say that I have a word about my son's pit bulls. I'm one of those people who has an adult child living in the basement. And I was not a happy camper that he had 2 pit bulls when he moved in. I had all these ideas about pit bulls, that they were vicious, and I had visions of them lurking in the corner waiting to bite my face off. So anyway, just keep that in mind. And I don't know why these slides are still not in order, but hold on. Okay, so Arizona, that's where I did the humanitarian aid work with the Samaritans. And the desert, I'm sure many of you, or not all of you, have been in the desert environment, but it has a unique beauty. When I was first stationed in the Air Force, I was stationed in New Mexico, and growing up in Pennsylvania, it was a different world. And when I got there, all I could think of was, oh my God, this is a God-forsaken place. And in the years that I was there, I really learned to love it. But the desert is truly unique, and the beauty is phenomenal. And these were some wildflower or desert flowers that were basically around when we were doing our walks. So those are more desert pictures. And this a friend sent me. The javelina is very common down there. I think it's pretty ugly, but they think it's pretty cute. And it's the caption is, the javelina saw its shadow, which means 6 more weeks of summer in Arizona. Okay, the desert also has another side, and it's a very, very rugged terrain, and with temperature extremes, and everything in it is either, as a friend told me, either stings, sticks, or bites. It's very, very harsh and unforgiving. Those are Samaritans doing their trip. And what the Samaritans do is they go into the desert, they look for refugees, they leave water and food, and they pick up bottled water, or the bottles from the water, and take them back to where they have a recycling place. And they minister medical aid, basic medical aid, and humanitarian aid to anyone that they come across. They also have found a lot of human remains. Just in the Sonora Desert alone, there have been over 3,000 basically findings of human remains. And that just gives you an idea of what these people are dealing with, that are coming hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles through terrain such as this. Even those flowers are in some rugged territory. This is a cholla. It's a cactus that is one mean sucker. It has these barbed spines, and the natives call them jumping chollas. Now, they don't really jump, but we weren't out in the desert 10 minutes. And after having been told about chollas and how wicked they are, I got stuck with chollas. And I can tell you, it's almost like they do jump. I wasn't really that close, but it was like this magnetic draw. And fortunately, I had long pants on that day. They are sticky and they are incredibly sharp. And the barrel cactus is another, those are those round cacti that you see. Those have barbed spines as well, and they're actually poisonous. The thing that happens is when these refugees are going through the desert and they don't have food, they begin to eat anything they can find or try to get water out of anything they can find. And oftentimes they will eat the things that have these spines. And when they're found, they just have their mouths and their tongue are just full of these, which I can't even imagine because having them in my leg was bad enough. Again, this is terrain, and that's Baba Kiwi out in the distance, that big mountain there. What's interesting is that there was freedom of movement between the North-South from time immemorial. I really became convicted of how little I know about North-South history. You know, we see all the Westerns, we read books about, you know, the migration of East to West, but nobody really talks about the North-South. And this slide is of an obelisk, which is very common. There are 276 obelisk monuments from the Rio Grande to the Pacific. And after the Mexican-American War, Mexico lost 55% of their territory. I had no idea it was that massive. So the freedom of movement that happened historically because of a migratory pattern of the people for their necessities, changed from a border of security to an idea of a strong nativist impulse and anti-terrorism. So the obelisks morphed into, okay, I'll just show you what's on there. It's really hard to read even if you're there. It just says, obelisk monument established 1853, boundary of the United States. And then it says Treaty of 1853, reestablished by the treaties of 1882 and 1889. There was historically a treaty with Hidalgo, Guadalupe. And then after the United States acquired all that land, Gadsden was the one that put these monuments up. And so that's the wall. That's the beautiful wall that the obelisks have morphed into. And it really has become a border industrial complex. I cannot tell you the feeling I had standing next to that wall. It was not there was a sense of despair and shame and sadness that it was overpowering. There is definitely a culture of cruelty. And you've all heard about the housing of children apart from their parents, but it's amazing how there's just these seemingly little things that are big things. And I'll get to that as we go through the slides. Concertina wire is everywhere. Okay, these are water jugs that are sold by the cartels at very, very high prices. And the cartels really have a lot of control. When these water jugs are found, it means that either somebody got to the wall and they couldn't get any farther, or they basically left their jugs and were walking through the desert without water, which happens a lot. I took that picture through the bars so that you could see. If you really look, the black are the cartel bottles, and interspersed, like right here, that would be a Samaritan bottle. The Samaritans fill these jugs and they put their symbol on it, and they have a blessing, and they put them in areas where the migrants would generally use the trail, but it's a crapshoot. I should mention that the humanitarian endeavors have been met with resistance by the border and ICE, and basically humanitarian aid workers have been arrested with criminal littering, is what they call leaving water in the desert. Okay, this is where the wall ends. This is the west side. This is near the border of Nogales. That was the main area that I was in. And on the west side, it pretty much just stops. This is kind of what it looks like. And I'm 65 and I could easily get across that. I mean, it's not difficult, but if you don't know where you're going, it would be like us being lost in the mountains. If you don't know the direction or you have no landmarks, you just wander. Again, there's the concertina wire. Okay, now we come to the crosses. This is a very incredible story. There is a gentleman, Alvaro Enciso, who is in his 70s and has taken it upon himself to mark every site that the Samaritans have found human remains. He makes those crosses and he trucks through the desert to put a cross in memory of those people. And on every cross, again, is the Samaritan symbol. Now, this is four crosses. This was a police chase of migrants, and the vehicle rolled, and four of the migrants died. And that's a tribute to them. Now, this is a shrine on the side of the road. This road, I mean, this is all rural road, but this is still one of the marked highways. On the side of the road, a mom was in labor and she made it to the road, but delivered the baby at the side of the road. Before she was found, the dehydration and other factors, she was so compromised, as well as the baby, that they were taking to a medical aid center, but they both died. And that's another one out just kind of in the middle of nowhere. I give him so much credit. He has now planted over 1,000 crosses. and he will not live long enough to mark them all. This is another finding that is part of the not so pretty side of the desert. And this is, we did not remove that covering. It could have been the belongings of a migrant, or it could be remains. But that's what the Samaritans do. And when they find something like this, they do mark the spot and they basically report it to authorities. This is where a migrant was arrested. And essentially what they do if they are being arrested or if they're running from being arrested, they just drop their stuff. They anything they have, they just leave it and run. And these also are quote unquote remains. And the Samaritans document all of this. Every single day, there is a group that goes out. They document everything they found, the place, the time, and the records are amazing. This is interesting. This is a bus that Border Patrol has that, I mean, there's many of them, not just this one bus. And they just go out and they sit. I mean, there's a gentleman in there and the air conditioner was running when we went by. And he just sits all day and looks for anybody that looks like they might be a migrant. I hate to say illegal, because one of the things that is very commonplace are posters in the desert that says no human is illegal. They sit there, and then of course, if Border Patrol finds migrants, they are picked up by the bus and taken to the detention centers. This is Gail, and you are looking at a living saint. Gail is 69. She has more health problems than you can count. And I bet she goes out into the desert 3 or 4 days a week. She is standing by a 50-gallon water tank that was placed by Humane Borders. And those, you can't see it, but off the back of it is a flag, a very, very high gray flag. And it basically shows people that are lost that there's water there. I mean, they may not know that there's water there, but they know that if they see the flag, most humans are inclined to go to something that is recognizable. So anyway, these are placed and they are also vandalized. They are vandalized by vigilantes as well as the Border Patrol. They have been contaminated with poison. They have been punctured. They have been emptied. And the same thing happens with those gallon water jugs that are left. You'll often see the jug there, but they'll have holes poked in them, or they rarely open them and dump them. They just basically poke holes in them. This is an interesting story. In July 24th of 2019, Gail was on one of her desert trips and she encountered 26 asylum seekers. And then on the 28th, just a few days later, she met 2 of them at the Greyhound bus station when they were on their way to Ohio. Now, the gentleman on the left had a brother in Ohio. His name is Juan, and his little boy was with him. Well, a few months later, Gail did hear from them, and they had safely arrived in Ohio to his brother's, and his wife and 2 children were detained in the Dilley Detention Center in Texas. They were later deported back to Guatemala in January. Gail didn't really hear anything from them for a time, and then about 3 weeks ago, she was surprised by a phone call. Juan called her and said that he is working. His son is in 2nd grade and his wife and 2 children are quote unquote surviving in Guatemala, and they are still waiting for an asylum hearing. This quote just seemed to be apropos. When we look at modern man, we have to face the fact that modern man suffers from a kind of poverty of the spirit, which stands in glaring contrast to his scientific and technological abundance. We've learned to fly like the birds, we've learned to swim the seas like fish, and yet we haven't learned to walk the earth as brothers and sisters. One day we did cross the border in Nogales, and this is the Mexican side. Nogales has the wall separated, the boundary separated the town of Nogales. So part of Nogales became Nogales, Arizona, and part of Nogales is Nogales, Mexico. Now this is the wall as seen from Nogales. And if you look really close, you'll see that this is the US side. The concertina wire is all along the US side. But if you look over here to the Mexican side, there's no concertina wire. Just, I find that interesting. You can see it better here. And that's the view of the wall, panoramic, and you kind of get an idea of just, and that's a short length of it. This really spoke to my heart. This is called Evening Meditation, and it's Waiting for the Wise Men. And I can't really go into everything I did because it was just too much. But one of the shelters that we visited, I got to tell you, we were walking through and there was this little boy with his mom, and she was in intake. She was filling out paperwork and being helped. And this little boy, sweet, but probably 4, big brown eyes, you know, milk chocolate skin. And he was playing like he was an airplane. And I have my technological skills are only matched by my ability to speak Spanish. So in my very limited Spanish, I said, you know, hola, ¿qué tal, cómo está? And he stopped and he looked at me and he had this beaming smile. And I just wish that I could have carried on the conversation, but he said to me, you know, he said, hola, bien, you know, ¿cómo está? And I just remember that face. I mean, I don't know what happened to he and his mom, but I really pray they're well, because that smile and those eyes, they will never leave me. Okay, the interesting thing that I found in Tucson is that we from El Norte have these preconceived ideas, you know, about what the border is and what these asylum seekers are and all of this, you know. And the reality is the people that live in the border are actually, for the most part, very, very supportive and protective of the immigrants. And it is not uncommon. It is not uncommon at all to see signs in people's windows, no more deaths. They have a pitcher of water as a symbol that if somebody needs water, they can come to that home. And in Aravaca, which is this little town, rural town in the desert, there is a restaurant. And I was struck because this restaurant had this sign on their door. And I thought, how in the world does a restaurant survive in the best of times in this little town? But to go on the limb and put that is, I found extraordinary. And unfortunately, with COVID, they are really struggling, but I really hope they make it. This is right across the street from that restaurant is the Aravaca Humanitarian Aid Office. And it's just this little office with really few staff, but hard workers. They have a library, they have information, resource services and information. It's quite the little place. And that's the front of it. You can't really see it, but up here is a map. And this red area right here are dots. And that's the number of places where remains were found just in Arizona, in Pima County. Okay, this is a little church, Southside Presbyterian Church, and this houses the Samaritans. The two have a cooperative agreement. The Samaritans meet at their church. They have the support of the church, not necessarily financially, but the church is there for them. And in this little courtyard outside the church, it's kind of a meditation area. And this over here is a shrine to the people that have died in the desert. And here are stones that have names and dates, and you'll see that better in a minute, okay? So people will put the name and the date that their loved one was found on these stones and put it at the shrine. And the plaque says, migrant shrine sculpture created for Southside Presbyterian Church by Valerie Jaquez and Antonio Gallegos in memory of migrants who died in our desert, designated on 28 September 2007. And that again is a close-up of what's under the shrine, or what's under the rock plaque. This is another area. This is in Arivaca. There is a Unitarian Universalist Congregational Church that has an amazing little campus, very sweet, and they provide housing to people that don't have any, including the humanitarian aid workers. And the minister there was just amazing. And they have this little area. They have names of people that have died in the desert. And outside of it, they have these little bronze shoes. And the insignia on that little tag right here says, these bronze shoes represent the children separated by ice. They serve as a reminder to all of us and their families that they are precious and we will not forget them.